Good evening once again from our NBC News headquarters here in New York. I'm Ali Velshi in for Brian Williams. This was day 223 of the Trump administration, and tonight, Harvey has been downgraded to a tropical depression after a dramatic day of rescues played out on televisions across the nation. The president had hoped to win the news cycle with tax reform after his speech in Missouri, but instead, and again, tonight it's Russia providing a slew of dramatic headlines. Just in the past few hours, from the New York Times, Trump lawyer vehemently denies Russian collusion. From the Wall Street Journal, Paul Manafort's overseas political work had a notable patron, a Russian oligarch. From the Financial Times, Russian lobbyist testifies to Mueller grand jury, and perhaps the biggest of all from Politico, Mueller teams up with New York Attorney General in Manafort probe. Josh Dawsey reports this about Special Counsel Robert Mueller and New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. The two teams, quote, have shared evidence and talked frequently in recent weeks about a potential case. According to Politico sources, it continues. One of the people familiar with the progress on the case said both Mueller's and Schneiderman's teams have collected evidence on financial crimes, including potential money laundering. No decision has been made on where or whether to file charges. Nothing is imminent, said one of the people familiar with the case. The report goes on to say, quote, people close to Manafort say the team has pressured him by approaching family members and former business partners. A number of other firms and people who have worked with him have received subpoenas. And a reminder, to date, Paul Manafort has not been charged with any crime. These stories all come after news from the Kremlin. A spokesman for Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Peskov, today confirming that he'd received an email from Trump's longtime attorney, Michael Cohen, about a real estate deal in Moscow, but he says they did not respond. With that, let's bring in tonight's starting panel. Ken Vogel, political reporter for the New York Times. Mike McFaul, former U.S. ambassador to Russia during the Obama administration and an MSNBC contributor. And former federal prosecutor and MSNBC analyst Paul Butler. Gentlemen, welcome to all of you. Paul, let me start with you. The Financial Times is reporting that Rinat Akhmetshin gave testimony to a grand jury in the Mueller investigation. The headline is followed by this. Rinat Akhmetshin, the lobbyist and former Soviet Army officer who met senior Trump campaign aides at a controversial meeting last year, gave testimony under oath for several hours on Friday, August the 11th, in a sign that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is looking at the 2016 meeting as part of his investigation into links between Donald Trump's election campaign and Russia. Paul, this is the thing that we keep hearing the Mueller investigation is coming back to because it's evidence of information that the president's team was not forthcoming about initially.
Yeah, so two things. First is, again, it's often the cover-up. So here we know that Trump created that false narrative about what happened. So we wonder, what's he trying to evade? The other is, this was a meeting in which the Russians offered information about Hillary, which Donald Jr. eagerly accepted. So they have this receptivity to collusion, to getting information about the Russians. Now, again, it's only a crime, collusion is, if it's something else illegal, like conspiring to hack emails. So just reaching out for information itself isn't a crime. But to the prosecutor, it looks suspicious, again, especially when you have the lack of transparency from President Trump.
Let me ask you, Ken, your newspaper has reported that President Trump's longtime lawyer, Michael D. Cohen, has given Congress a point-by-point rebuttal of a dossier alleging that he has deep ties to Russian officials, an effort to clear his name as the Justice Department and congressional committees investigate Russia's attempts to disrupt last year's election. Mr. Cohen vehemently denies the claims made in the dossier about him, which are false and remain wholly unsubstantiated, Mr. Cohen's lawyer wrote. What do you make of this?
Well, with both Cohen and the Rinat Akhmetshin, the interest in Rinat Akhmetshin, the bigger thing that that unites them and that these get at is intent. What did these folks close to Trump want from these relationships? With Paul Manafort, it's really an investigation into his business ties, into potential money laundering, financial crimes, things that don't necessarily have to do with the Trump campaign. With Renat Ekmechin and the meeting that Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort took with him, he, as the prior guest just said, they were offering something, and that is the context in which the Trump folks accepted it. So it gets to intent. Same thing with Michael Cohen. These emails that we broke earlier this week that showed Michael Cohen emailing with this Russian-American businessman with whom Trump had done business in the past, Felix Sater. Felix Sater is suggesting that this project in Moscow that Michael Cohen was working on, the Trump Tower Moscow, was potentially linked to obtaining Russia's help in the election campaign, that these were somehow linked, and Cohen was taking him up on his offer and actually trying to get assistance from the Kremlin on this offer. That also shows intent. Whether they actually got anything or not, and all evidence suggests that they didn't, nonetheless, that they had acted on something that they thought was going to involve Russia and be of benefit to Donald Trump's presidential campaign, that is not to be taken lightly.
And Mike McFaul, this is an interesting one. There was actually a denial issued by a man named Dmitry Peskov, a press attaché to Vladimir Putin, in which he says, I confirm that among a number of emails, one from Mr. Michael Cohen came to us. This indeed happened, said Dmitry Peskov, a personal spokesman for Putin, during a telephone briefing with Russian and foreign journalists. It goes on to say, but as far as we don't respond to business topics, this is not our job. We did not send a response. You found that unusual, that somebody at that level would offer an actual denial of the idea that Michael Cohen sent an email to Vladimir Putin.
I did, because he's not obligated to respond. There's no journalist asking him to respond. And let's be clear about who Dmitry Peskov is. I know him, of course. I worked with him. He's not just a press spokesperson. He is a very close confidant of the president, President Putin. They've been together for a long, long time. He sees Putin every day in a way that most others don't. So he is a senior person. Somebody obviously gave Mr. Cohen the advice that he's the guy that you need to contact to get to Putin. I can imagine somebody telling him that. But that he would respond, I think, is very unusual, and maybe it suggests that, you know, they no longer think that President Trump is useful to them, and they're not concerned about undermining him.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.